Hey, 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 Action Figure Plus fans. This is the General coming back at you with a very cool, very timeless piece again, Star Trek, in the USS Defiant NX 74205 Valiant class prototype destroyer. Here we have the venerable Defiant, and again, very awesome piece from the Star Trek Playmates line and DS9 segment. And again, at a time when DS9 is on top and having its amazing, amazing run. And who could ever forget one of the most amazing vessels to ever come out of DS9 in the USS Defiant? And again, for folks at home that have been living under a rock and hadn't seen DS9 and are outside of the Trek universe, we have the Defiant. And the Defiant was an unconventional sort of warship that the Federation Starfleet developed in response to the sort of emerging Borg threat that came out of the timeless episode Star Trek The Next Generation's Best of Both Worlds. And the whole idea was, of course, to make a sort of modular, smaller, but very powerful bang for your buck punch kind of machine. And starship in this case. And of course, the Federation had traditionally never really been about making warships and big, huge, massive battle cruisers in the same kinds of ways as that they used to, possibly in the original series era, and of course up until the movies. I believe if you look into the sort of Star Trek lore of things, like Starfleet, there's definitely been all kinds of in that expanded universe of things. Just that Starfleet had, they did have big, massive sort of capital ships. But of course, we never really, in the movie series, we didn't really got too many shots of those. But it was time after a while to do some really modular, small, bang for your buck punch kind of design. And of course, heavy ablative armor. This vessel sported pulse phaser cannons, which again was developed at Utopia Planitia on Mars with Cisco and things developing this vessel. And it was initially intended for that Borg threat, but then quickly kind of got put on the shelf. But then with that sort of emerging threat of the Dominion on their doorstep, it became an ideal sort of vessel to deal with the vast sort of swarms of Jem'Hadar attack vessels. And the thing is, like, I mean, like in developing these new ships or whatever, it definitely made sense to have something sort of modular and smaller and lots of bang for your punch and harder to hit maybe and faster. One of the biggest things that the Federation have probably learned the hard way several times is that big massive capital ships are great, and of course they pack a punch and all that, but the biggest problem with big huge massive capital ships or flagships in this case, like the Galaxy class vessel being one of the largest, if not the largest of that time, they also make big huge massive great huge massive targets too. As you can see, the with the Enterprise D, or more specifically the Galaxy class vessels, although very powerful and large and sporting massive weaponry, they kind of were like a battleship fortress, but sort of made of glass. Because in other sort of instances, we've seen the Galaxy class vessel get either overpowered or it kind of sometimes struggled over against multiple attackers and purposely built starships like warships and combat oriented vessels, whereas the Galaxy class ships and all that stuff were, they sported a lot of that, but you had that whole sort of civilian scientific element and all that stuff on there, and like a lot of people on that vessel. So big capital ships were great, but they also made big huge massive targets that could be destroyed. And so the Federation had to sort of change up its game and sort of look at vessels that were a bit more modular. And we've seen since the Defiant and into the First Contact movie and sort of post TNG era vessels that they seem to kind of go for that more slicker, smaller, streamlined. And even what we see in the Enterprise E, like, I mean, those designs are very much of a slick, sort of streamlined vessel. It didn't make more sense to make an even larger Enterprise. But anyways, I digress onto the Enterprise and this, with the Defiant. But so it made more sense to have something modular and tough. And the Defiant, as we've seen in DS9, got all kinds of missions done. It did all kinds of things, and of course, not all of Valiant class vessels were equipped with them. The Defiant also had a cloaking device supplied by the Romulan Star Empire, and of course, this was to help with surveillance on the Dominion. And so it kind of set that it was one of those things that sort of set it apart from other Federation ships, when sort of like that was that one ship that they would allow to have a cloaking device. Of course, we all know that Starfleet probably has cloaking technology or whatever such. They just don't implement it in the ways that the Romulans and the Klingons do. But here we are, the Defiant, and let's take a walk around of the toy. Again, I'm not sure how widespread it was. I don't think it was so readily available as other vessels in the Playmates line. But for light and sound, this one actually works. You got some light and sound going on. I think that's the cloaking device. That's your phaser cannons. And again, I've always loved the Defiant sort of pulse phaser cannons. You got, I think that's photon torpedoes, quantum torpedoes, and then red alert. So yeah. Red alert. And so the Defiant pulse phaser cannons, cloaking device, and of course, quantum torpedoes. Quantum torpedoes were another sort of new evolution to Starfleet's arsenal of torpedoes. And what can I say? I loved it. If there was ever any kind of sort of nod, if you're like a Trek and Star Wars fan at the same time, maybe it's kind of like, the Star Trek's the next best thing to sort of that imagery that was sort of put out there with the Millennium Falcon when it came out. And I know they're completely different, and obviously probably different, completely different sizes and two different, completely different universes, but it gets that cool factor, like a cool modular a ship that can dish out a lot of damage. And you've seen them; they destroyed freaking Jem'Hadar vessel after the next, Klingon birds of prey. It could definitely take on several vessels, probably it could definitely hold its own against vessels well over its size. And so you can see why Starfleet really wanted a whole pile of those to not only fight the Borg, but also the Jem'Hadar as well. And so here we are, the Defiant. Oh yes, and unfortunately the Defiant, though, like the prototype Defiant, does get lost in Chitaka against the Breen, and the joint Breen and Dominion Cardassian against the Federation allied fleets with the Federation Klingon and Romulans. It was a heartbreaker to see it destroyed. It was such a amazing vessel. And I gotta say, like, even in First Contact, when I saw First Contact for the first time, my heart just fluttered as soon as I saw like the Defiant actually being used on a Borg cube in exactly the way it was intended to do. And what can I say? That's one of my favorite opener sort of beginning sequences in First Contact. It's awesome when you finally see the Defiant and they're giving wave to all the different sort of spin-off Trek shows and things like that. So here we have the USS Defiant. May she rest in peace. She eventually, Cisco got another Valiant class ship, and they renamed it Defiant. I think it was called the Sao Paulo. So they got a Defiant back after it was after the first one was destroyed. But what can I say? What a remarkable vessel, and so gosh darn cool. So here we are, USS Defiant, and sending it off. General out.